It's Wednesday, February 24th, and it's time for your Barbados Today morning news update. The president of the Association of Public Primary School Principals is not on board with suggestions to scrap this year's common entrance exam, despite lingering uncertainty about the firm date. Hyacinth Harris tells Barbados Today the June 22 date announced in late December continues to be viewed as tentative, even though important matters are still outstanding.
With regard to common entrance, we are still awaiting a definitive statement from the Ministry of Education in terms of the date and so on. We had been given a date initially, but they're still saying that this is a fluid situation. And, we're still working on what must be done prior to administering the test. So parents still have to complete their choice of school forms, and all of that paperwork still has to be completed before we can actually test the student. All that still has to be done. There's a lot of work to be done, and as soon as we get that information, I'm sure the ministry will convey it to the press.
Late last year, Barbados entered its second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, forcing thousands of students to resort to online classes. Despite the challenges this has brought upon teachers, students, principals, and parents, Harris says that there are currently no alternatives to the exam.
I am not necessarily in favor of that unless we have an alternative that is reasonable and that does not disadvantage any child. As it is right now, I think since the students were preparing to write the exam, we need to put systems in place for them to do that.
In other news, a chip including information such as the holder's fingerprint, driver's license, and other personal data will be included in the proposed Barbados Digital ID and National ID card. However, Attorney General and Home Affairs Minister Dale Marshall has promised that the data on the chip would be protected and can only be shared with whom the holder allows. Marshall made the disclosure as he spoke on the Barbados Identity Management Bill 2021 in Parliament yesterday.
That data, Mr. Speaker, would include such things as your fingerprint if you wish. Because at the end of the day, when you present your ID card, somebody ought to be able to authenticate it. You ought to be able to authenticate it. And therefore, your national ID card, when now issued, will have a chip which will have data on it, and that data is protected, and that data is available to the individuals with whom you're dealing if you so desire. Now, this really, it is not a long bill. It is only about 34 or 35 sections. But what it speaks to is a modern environment for doing something that we've come to take for granted.
The AG explained that a campaign would be launched about the security of the digital ID, which is set to replace the laminated plastic card currently being used.
We need a secure form of ID that is available for Barbadians, that is available for anybody who is entitled to register, and that will establish with the maximum level of certainty that I am who I say I am. Happily, technology has brought us to a place where we are now able to do that. And this national ID bill will once and for all give our ID the power and authority of statute that it so badly needs, and will establish a certain framework for its issue and for its management.
Meantime, St. George North MP Tony Moore has called for a holistic rollout of a digital education strategy. She issued the call yesterday in her contribution to the bill to introduce a smart ID card to replace the current laminated card. She said more has to be done for citizens to obtain the level of education required to ensure that they understand digital engagement and its benefits.
I heard also reference being made to the security features in the card. And that is something that we must not only convey by simple means of information sharing, but I think that we must go a bit deeper and teach about cybersecurity as Barbados finds itself launching out and pursuing more digital means of engagement. It was explained to me that the ID card has a number of security elements in it, which are very tight. But how do we get that information communicated to the wider population? I heard mention being made of a rollout of a sensitization plan program where we will speak about the efficiencies that we consider are in the technology being rolled out. But beyond that, I think that our people, it is important for our people, Mr. Speaker, to be educated on the simple benefits and the simple challenges that they can encounter when they do transactions online.
Too many Barbadians remain without a bank or credit union account. That's according to Minister in the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Investment, Marsha Cadell, who suggested that this could undermine government's efforts to roll out a digital payment system. Speaking in Parliament yesterday on the National Payment System Bill to introduce the system, Cadell said it made no sense implementing technological advancements if a large portion of the population could not reap the benefits.
There's so many things that are required in order to have it take effect. And this issue of financial literacy is one of them. One of the things that we've discovered and that we've known for some time is this issue of people who are unbanked or underbanked. So we are busy creating a system of technology or technological capability, and there are people who don't have a bank account, there are people who don't have a credit union account, there are people whose whole lives are cash-based. But here's the issue. While we might say leave them alone, they're good with their cash. They're not good with their cash. Let me tell you why. Because they don't have the wherewithal to have any kind of financial footprint. It puts them in a difficult position when they have to establish a credit history, when they have to face a financial institution to try to get some kind of loan, or to just interact with the world in terms of financial transactions. So the issue of being unbanked is one that we have to address.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
To news from the region, officials in Bermuda are reporting that 18% of the population has received the first doses of the vaccine against COVID-19, while 7% received the second doses. They say the country's goal of herd immunity will be achieved when 70% of the population, or 64,054 people, are vaccinated.
We are getting closer to our goal of having 19,000 persons fully immunized by March 31st. With 17,073 doses administered through yesterday, Bermuda remains among the top 10 countries, according to Our World in Data, in the world for vaccinations administered relative to population size. What is most important is that the number of doses administered increased this week by 24% over the prior period, which demonstrates that the move to the Bermuda College has had its intended effect of increasing the pace of our vaccination program. While this is very welcome news, it is vital for all Bermudians to understand that until we reach that goal, until we make sure that a significant amount of our seniors and the vulnerable are immunized, it is not a time to let our guard down. As we know, it only takes one person to start an outbreak, and it is vital that we remain vigilant.
And finally, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the climate emergency currently facing the globe is the defining issue of our time. He said that the shocks created by climate change weaken the world's political, economic, and social systems. The UN head told a virtual meeting of the Security Council addressing climate and security that the impacts of the crisis are greatest where fragility and conflicts have weakened coping mechanisms, adding that vulnerability to climate risks is also connected with income inequality.
Unless we protect those most exposed and susceptible to climate-related impacts, we can expect them to become even more marginalized and their grievances to be reinforced. High levels of inequality that climate change enhances can weaken social cohesion and lead to discrimination, scapegoating, rising tensions and unrest, increasing the risk of conflict. Those who are already being left behind will be left even farther behind.
That's news. But for the very latest, visit us at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, or like us on Facebook, and sign up for our breaking news alerts via WhatsApp. We're also on Izumi Media in bus terminals, as well as screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. And you can also hear us on Mix 96.9 FM and Capital Media HD 99.3 FM.